This video is sponsored by Premium Sound, one of the UK's premier dealers located in Kensington, London, with an online store carrying a comprehensive inventory to cater for a variety of needs. For more details, click the link in the description. So far, 2025 has proved a bumper year for amplifiers. New streaming amplifiers from WiiM and Eversolo offer great value for money, and that little SMSL Raw HA1 with a built-in DAC costing 250 quid is excellent. But it's not just the new kids on the block. The establishment also seem to have upped their game. Rega launched an updated version of their Brio amplifier. The Mk7 retails for £799 in the UK. The circuit layout has been improved and a DAC has been included for the first time. Audiolab has made significant improvements to their popular 6000A. The Mark II features an improved DAC, HDMI ARC input, all for £649. It sounds better than the original, despite having many of the same components. I'll get into the reasons why later. For now, let me just say that Musical Fidelity are getting in on the act. They've launched a new amplifier that will compete directly with the Rega Brio Mk7 and the Audiolab 6000A Mark II. Out goes the Musical Fidelity M2SI, and in comes the B1xi. It has slightly less power, but a built-in DAC, and as far as I can tell, the same standard of build quality, and oh yes, it is cheaper. Oh boy, hang on to your hats for this one. Like many manufacturers, Musical Fidelity are reviving their back catalogue, whereas the A1, resuscitated in 2023, stays true to the original design visually and electronically. The new B1 only carries the name of the 1990s classic, which was highly regarded in its time for its warm and dynamic sound. The B1, now with an XI suffix, shares the same design language as the M series of amplifiers. It's an all-metal case with a folded steel chassis and a 7mm 0.3-inch anodized aluminium front panel. Even the buttons and dials are aluminium. Not bad for £699. Measurements are 430 by 90 by 324mm or 16.9 by 3.5 by 12.8 inches, and the unit weighs 7.2 kilograms or 15.9 pounds. Next to the standby button are direct access buttons for each input, a welcome bonus. There are 4 analog inputs to the left of the centrally located volume dial, one of which is for the moving magnet phonostage. 4 digital inputs are located on the right. Unlike the discontinued M2SI, the B1xi has a built-in DAC. The 5th button is for an additional line level input, for which there is a front-mounted 3.5mm jack. A 6.3mm 1/4-inch headphone socket is on the extreme right. Connections on the rear confirm that the B1xi is a well-featured device, with digital inputs running along the top and analog single-ended RCA connections below. There's also one set of pre-outs and standard quality speaker terminals. A USB asynchronous digital input has been omitted to achieve the target price. However, the inclusion of HDMI ARC is an indication of how important this feature is becoming in this market segment to ensure easy integration with TVs. One final point of note, the 5V 1A USB-C power output has been designed to be used with entry-level streamers that often come with inexpensive wall-wart power supplies. This should provide a useful upgrade with access to the internal linear power supply. Quick tour of the internals. That's a generous sized toroidal transformer for an amplifier in this class. There's no rating on the sticker, but it may be 300 VA or so, and it contributes significantly to the weight of this amplifier. Behind that is the AC inlet filter and a small standby power supply. And then you have the power supply regulation and the main filter caps. Those caps are branded Audio Cap. I'm not familiar with that brand. The 2 large filter caps have got NEG written on them, so they may be a negative polarity. They also have a fairly high voltage at 105, whereas modest power amplifiers generally have a voltage on the caps of, say, 85, maybe even 65 volts. So the supply rails may be running at a high voltage. And the other thing to note is that they're only 6,800 microfarads a piece. I'd like to see a minimum of 10,000 microfarads a piece, so we'll see if this affects the ability of this amplifier to deal with bass transients when things get motoring. I'll come back to the power amplifier in a second. Actually, just very quickly before I move on, there's a motorized volume control here, and wires connect it to the preamplifier, which is under those boards there, and the phono stage is next to it, but you can't really see it. And those two boards sticking up on the left is the HDMI board and the DAC board. And the DAC board uses an ESS 9018 K2M chip, which has been around for over a decade now. And I do really wish that manufacturers, even at this price, maybe charge a little bit more and put one of the later ESS DACs in, the 9038 Q2M that is in the Audiolab 6000A, for example. I don't think it'd cost that much more. They could pass the cost on to the consumer fairly easily. There's the power amplifier section, heatsink, and the output devices. They're Toshiba output devices. They're bipolar junction transistors in this push-pull design. And the amplifier has a 60 watt rating into 8 ohms, 100 watts into 4 ohms, and 140 watts into 2 ohms. It's unusual to have a 2 ohm rating, relatively modestly priced amplifiers. So that suggests that this is quite a stable design, and it may be able to derive some tricky impedance loads on speakers. So yeah, I'm not sure if I mentioned it is a fully discrete design, so there's no ICs, although there are lots of little surface mounts rather than through-hole components on the power amplifier section. But again, I suppose that's understandable given the price. I do feel that Musical Fidelity sometimes leave a little bit of performance on the table with their choice of parts, but it doesn't always relate to how things sound, so we'll see. Before I get into this, there's something that I want to share with you. I had an in-depth chat with the electronics designer at Rega a little while ago. I was aware that they discontinued the Brio Mk7 due to the unavailability of a couple of parts. So I asked what had changed in the Mk7 other than the addition of a DAC. Aston Wagner confirmed that the components are very similar, but he learned lessons from the I/O project and wanted to implement the improved circuit architecture in the Brio as well. I had a similar conversation with Jan Ertner too. He's the chief electronics designer at IAG, responsible for Audiolab, Mission, Quad and their other brands. I asked him, why does a 6000A Mark II sound better than its predecessor when you look under the lid or at the specs? Everything seems to be the same. Jan pointed out that there are tweaks to the preamplifier and power supply sections in particular that won't grab headlines but accumulate to make a difference. Again, he discovered better ways of doing things from the 7000A, 9000A and Quad projects. So, why am I pointing this out? Well, this is the context in which the new Musical Fidelity amplifier has to compete against two long-standing, highly regarded amplifiers that have got better in 2025, and oh my, does it compete. The B1xi has exceptional clarity, sense of timing and drive to keep rhythms in control. The bass has such definition that you'll be forgiven for thinking that it's a Class D design. The £499 Cambridge Audio MX-W70 is a power amplifier with a discrete Hypex Encore module. Its high damping factor helps it achieve parity with the B1xi for note-to-note low-frequency articulation. But the Cambridge Audio amplifier is a little bit light in the bass and has that typical lean-sounding Class D mid-range. These are not issues for the Musical Fidelity. The bass sits appropriately in balance with the mids and the highs, neither polite or exaggerated. The mid-range quality is also something to marvel at in its market segment. The Rega Brio Mk7 is the only amplifier I've encountered to rival the B1xi's resolution. Both are remarkably revealing amplifiers with an uncanny ability to separate instruments given their price. Despite its excellent timing, the Brio Mk7 has a soundstage that is relatively narrow and flat with a slightly elevated upper mid-range. In comparison, the B1xi produces a sound field that is wider, deeper and more layered. This week's musical interlude is courtesy of Mo Calamity. Her Warriors of Light album scandalously slips under the radar. With so many great tracks, selecting one is hard. Reggae Vibration is one of my personal favourites. Enjoy her soulful vocals set to a chilled reggae backdrop. Back to the review. Having shed the dry personality of its predecessor, the new Audiolab 6000A Mark II has a balanced tonality, great fidelity and ability to drive a wide range of speakers. That's what makes it such a fantastic all-rounder. I'm surprised that I'm saying this so soon after my 6000A Mark II review. I genuinely expected it not to be bettered, I don't know, maybe for years. But the Musical Fidelity B1xi does sound better. The bass is tighter, the mid-range is cleaner and the high is more open. The Audiolab's not getting blown away here though. It's just a refinement to the sound. The £1,950 exposure 2510 is a step up in performance from the Audiolab 6000A Mark II. But for that rationale to hold true, it can only be considered half a step above the Musical Fidelity B1xi. What's more of a surprise to me is how similar the exposure and Musical Fidelity amplifiers are in tone. Both add a light glimmer of warmth to lend a bit of richness to the sound. How much are you going to notice the difference between the B1xi and the 2510? Well, that depends on your partnering equipment. Also, my comments relate to using the Musical Fidelity amplifier through its analog inputs. When you use the internal DAC, the picture changes. These are all important points to cover in the next section. Let me make this point clear. For just under 700 quid, the Musical Fidelity B1xi is a phenomenal piece of kit, even if you're using it just as a straight amplifier. I can't comment about the quality of the internal moving magnet phonostage, but I can tell you about the capabilities of the internal DAC. It fits into my good enough to get you started category as opposed to the don't worry about upgrading category. The ESS 9018 K2M chip-based DAC isn't as resolving as the 9038 Q2M based DAC inside the Audiolab 6000A Mark II. That means that the Audiolab sounds cleaner through its digital inputs than the Musical Fidelity amplifier, so I'd urge you to upgrade the DAC. But how much should you spend? Something as capable as the Cambridge Audio DacMagic 200M would be a minimum. It has a revised and lower retail price of £349 in 2025 and is sometimes on sale for less than £300. The DacMagic 200M is another ESS chip-based DAC, but this time running two 9028 Q2M chips in dual mono. Listen, without sounding like a broken record, there's a lot more to it than the chips, but the important thing to remember is that the 200M has enough detail to do the B1xi justice and a natural tone to not mess things up. However, the new Musical Fidelity entry amplifier is accomplished enough to justify spending more money on a better DAC if funds permit. My Denafrips Aries 12th anniversary is essentially the same as the current Enyo 15th anniversary and retails in the UK for £865. It's not overkill, not when you consider that this amplifier is knocking on the door of the performance achieved by the best amplifiers at £2,000. The Enyo 15th anniversary will allow the detail, natural timbre and spatial abilities of the B1xi to shine through. For source components you can get away with spending less thanks to one of the greatest bargains in hi-fi. The £299 Bluesound Node Nano achieves sound quality similar to the DacMagic 200M by using analog connections between amplifier and streamer. The Nano is also an excellent streaming transport, bolting the Denafrips DAC to the Bluesound streamer via digital coaxial or optical connections brings the worthwhile improvement in fidelity previously mentioned. Naturally, the full potential of this system is not possible if the speakers aren't up to the task, and here you're not going to get away with skimping. The Monitor Audio Silver 100 7Gs are the most detailed dynamic speakers I've encountered for anywhere near the £800 asking price. They also have an ability to disappear in the room, allowing the Musical Fidelity amp to show its qualities. There's a bit of leanness to the sound of the Monitor Audios. The richness of the B1xi is enough to compensate to some extent, but not totally. Despite that, The Silver 100 7Gs are so capable that they remain one of my very top recommendations for this amplifier. The entry Musical Fidelity amplifier is not outclassed by the significantly more expensive Dali Minuet SEs. These £1,500 mini monitors are superbly revealing whilst maintaining a natural tone. Hardly any amplifiers at this price range can live with the little Dalis without embarrassing themselves. The fact that the B1xi doesn't sound artificial shows that it scales well. Yes, something like an Exposure 2510 will give you more nuanced information and refinement, but it is 3 times the price. That scalability has limits. The £1,800 Quadrovela ones require an amplifier with more current to not sound soft and cloudy. The Musical Fidelity B1xi makes a good fist of things, but should only be considered a stopgap. The new Wharfedale Evo 5.3s are in for review. They're a much more appropriate choice in terms of price and demands placed upon an amplifier. That review should be coming soon, but don't they look lovely in this new satin grey finish? Stick with stand mount speakers below £1,000 and floor standards below £2,000. There are hardly any that require high current amplifiers. Once you get to about £2,000 for stand mounts and £3,000 for floor standards, that is no longer necessarily the case, so you need to be a bit more careful. Okay, time to wrap things up. The new Musical Fidelity B1xi is a traditional looking, well-constructed amplifier. The aluminium buttons and volume dial impart a sense of quality above the norm at this price. Despite the B1 name, this amplifier is looking more to the future than the past. The inclusion of a HDMI ARC input facilitates TV integration with a basic DAC and moving magnet phonostage to serve the needs of many. I'd upgrade to a better external DAC, and it's likely that you'd have to do the same with the phonostage as well. But I'm interested in this amplifier primarily as an amplifier. Okay, there's a little bit of coloration to the sound, adding some richness, but it's not enough to worry about the speakers that you pair with it. The B1xi combines in one package the bass control of the Cambridge Audio MX-W70, the resolution of the Rega Brio Mk7, and the ability to drive a wide range of price-appropriate speakers, like the Audiolab 6000A Mark II. Where does that leave me? Well, it leaves me with the best sounding amplifier I've encountered to date, below £1,000. Its performance came as quite a surprise. The Musical Fidelity B1xi gets an outstanding from this channel. The law of diminishing returns seems to be kicking in earlier and earlier, with products at the accessible end of the market continually improving. And that brings me on to the question for today. Where do you see the point where you think, sod it, I ain't spending any more money? Please let me know in the comments section. And I know that these kind of discussions sometimes can get a little heated, so just remind everybody to be respectful of others' opinions. I'm sure you know what to do by now. If you want to support me here and what I do, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.